Hello, everybody, and welcome to the brand new Just Work podcast. I'm here with Ernest Adams, and I'm Kim
Hello,
Scott.
everyone. Hello, nice to see you.
Great to see you, Ernest. So, what Ernest and I talked about doing is reading a couple of pages from Just Work and then talking about it. A lot of people have said that this is a book that's kind of hard to read, and maybe it would be nice to break it down into little chunks. So
It's a hard
is
topic,
what,
Kim. It's a hard
yeah,
topic.
it is. It was hard to write. It's hard to read. We're going to make it easy. And one of the bits of feedback that I got after Radical, if you write a book about feedback, you're going to get a lot of it. And some of the most frequent feedback I got about the Radical Candor audiobook is that people hate the sound of my voice. So Ernest has kindly agreed to read a couple of pages from Just Work, and then we'll chat about it. All right, Ernest, over to you.
Okay, great. So everyone forgive me here in my reading skills. Please don't judge. We're gonna come from part one, the root causes of workplace injustice. And this is about bias, prejudice, and bullying, how to confront each effectively. What gets in the way of basic fairness at work, in my experience, there are three root causes of workplace injustice: bias, prejudice, and bullying. Each is different and must be considered separately if we are to come up with the most effective ways to combat each. When a power imbalance is present, things get much worse quickly. Discrimination, harassment, and physical violations occur. We'll consider these problems in part two. Let's start by examining how to root out the root causes. And so when we talk about problems, before we begin, let me offer some super short definitions and a simple framework to help keep us oriented in a problem that can be very disorienting. Bias is not meaning it. Bias, often called unconscious bias, comes from the part of our mind that jumps to conclusions, usually without our even being aware of it. These conclusions and assumptions aren't always wrong, but they often are, especially when they reflect the stereotypes. We do not have to be helpless victims of our brains. We can learn to slow down and question our biases. Prejudice is meaning it. Unfortunately, when we stop to think, we don't always come up with the best answer either. Sometimes we rationalize our biases and they harden into prejudices. In other words, we justify our biases rather than challenging their flawed assumptions and stereotypes. Bullying is being mean. The intentional, repeated use of in-group status or power to harm or humiliate others. Sometimes bullying comes with prejudice, but often it's more instinctive behavior. There may be no thought or ideology at all behind it. It can be a plain or just an animal instinct to dominate, to coerce. So let's talk a little bit about the responses. The most effective responses match the problem we're trying to solve. To root out bias, prejudice, and bullying, we must respond to each differently. In my experience, when people's biases are pointed out to them, when people's biases are pointed out to them clearly and compassionately, they usually correct them and apologize. Prejudice, however, is a conscious and ingrained belief. People don't change their prejudices simply because someone points them out. Holding up a mirror doesn't help. People like what they see. What's important is to draw a clear boundary between people's right to believe whatever they want and their freedom to impose their prejudices on others. Bullying has to incur real consequences to be stopped. If bullies were swayed by being aware of the harm they were doing to the people they were bullying, they wouldn't be treating other people badly in the first place. Usually, they are trying to hurt someone. Pointing out the pain they are inflicting doesn't make them stop and may even encourage them to double down.
All right. So, what do you think? You and I had a couple of conversations about like this difference between bias and prejudice. Tell me what you think.
Look, I think it's really important to understand the brain when we talk about this, and that is, the word bias has gotten, I think, in our humanity, has gotten a really negative judgment attached to it. But when we understand the brain, bias is our brain taking shortcuts.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
It's what Daniel Kahneman says in Thinking Fast and Slow. Yeah.
And our brains are built to be efficient.
Yeah.
So ultimately, taking shortcuts is what our brains do. And so I think when you understand that, bias is really like, you don't even know that you're doing it. You walk down a street at night, you're not going to walk down a dark alley.
Yeah.
right? You don't make a
Yeah.
conscious thought to do that, but that's a
Yeah.
bias.
Yeah. Yeah.
In that
Absolutely.
moment, right? And so I think it's really important to say biases are no judgment attached to it. I'm not doing this because I'm a bad person.
Yeah. Or I'm not doing it because I really believe what my
Yes,
action or the word I just chose might imply that I believed. But if I
exactly.
stop and think about it, I'm not going to double down. I'm not going to say, yeah, like that's prejudice. Like
That's
if
prejudice.
yeah, yeah. Uh,
Yeah.
so, but I think, you said something really interesting. We were having a conversation a couple of weeks ago. You said, I thought of their their unconscious biases and conscious biases. And I
Mhm.
thought conscious bias was kind of prejudice. So do you think it's useful to like not use the word bias at all when it is referring to something that's conscious?
100%. I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think, you know, growing up as a little black boy in this country, you were taught that black people can't be racist, is what we were taught, because there
Yeah.
was a power dynamic that was associated with the system of racism, and that
Yeah.
black people were not sitting in a system of power. And so then we were taught black people can be prejudiced, but not necessarily racist. And I always grappled with really understanding kind of who
Yeah.
can be prejudiced and who can be racist and when do those things come to life. But I think this is a really nice outline to say bias is unconscious, prejudice is you know what you're doing,
Yeah.
you know? And I think that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. And I think also, I mean, this is another thing that I'd be interested in your thoughts on. Growing up as a little white girl, I think that often, the what I would say sexism felt very different from misogyny. Not that I had those
Mhm.
when I was when I was a child.
Yeah.
But there were times when someone said something that kind of reflected a system. So
Mhm.
I don't think I, I can be sexist, but
Mhm.
I certainly can be biased against women,
Absolutely.
can jump to conclusions
Yep.
that are biased. And I guess there have been times maybe when I've worked for women who
Mhm.
did things that I would say were discriminatory. And now once we layer power into the on top of
Yes.
bias or prejudice, then all of a sudden we get discrimination, then all of a sudden we get the system, and those things were sexist. I
Absolutely.
hope, well, and I would say there were times, I talk about them much later in the book, when I did tolerate some bullying or even harassing behavior as
Yes.
a woman leader, and I shouldn't have, and so
Mhm.
now
Mhm.
was I doing the I was participating in
Part of it.
misogyny,
Yes.
I
Yes.
hate to
Yes.
say that, I never intended to, but I
Of
did it.
course. Of course.
And
Of course.
so, yeah, I think it's really important. Um,
Yeah. I spot on, Kim. I can't I don't know that I've had instances where I participated in prejudice of black people. Well, I probably have. I absolutely probably have. But I think more so even being gay. I was just talking
yeah,
about this with some friends of mine this past weekend when I can think of very specific instances in college where my friends were not nice to people who they thought were gay. And I never stood up on behalf of those people who were being called out as gay. And I have a
yeah,
lot of regret around that because I was participating and active in the bullying that was happening as a gay man myself, but I was not out at that
yeah,
time. And so
yeah,
there was really, it's interesting. It's a lot of prejudice even that gay people sometimes have before we come out in
yeah,
our own minds about our own groups of people.
yeah,
And that
yeah.
for me is even more poignant sometimes than the race dynamic for me.
Yeah, and I'm sorry that happened. I mean, I think that, but also I admire your ability to notice it. And like, we can't do
Mhm.
right if we won't notice what we're doing wrong,
Yes, yes,
And
yes.
all of us do think, we all. I don't think anybody is, from the time they're 7 years old, the person they want to be, or
Yes.
we're becoming the people we want to be, and I think applying a growth mindset to these
Hmm.
issues that feel very emotional, and it's like I want to be a certain kind of, I want to be a good person, like
Yeah,
if
yeah,
I boil it
yeah.
down to the simplest possible frame. And I'm not always good. Like, I do some
Yeah.
bad things,
Yeah.
and I can't get better if I won't acknowledge the bad things.
Of course. Of course.
And yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, what's so really interesting also, again, going back to the science of the brain is understanding how neural pathways work. And when you really think about it, it's really difficult for us to interrupt a neural pathway that our brain has been working off of when we're in a moment of
Yes.
stress or tension. It's almost
Yeah.
impossible, right?
Yeah.
And the only times that you can interrupt that are before you walk into that moment of stress or after, right?
Mhm.
And so the
Mhm.
reflective thinking, number one, is so critical for people, for humans, for leaders to do, because you can then think back. You can then begin to practice the next time I'm in that tense meeting, or the next time I'm around this person or this group of friends. I know that I'm going to be something's going to come up that's going to challenge me, and I'm
Yeah.
going to have to choose a different behavior in that moment, right?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think, again, that's just really important for us as human beings to really think about that and understand there's work behind this.
Yeah. And I think also like with bias, I find it really impossible for me to become sitting alone in my room aware of my unconscious
Yes.
bias. Like, I need
Yes.
other
Yes.
people. I need other people for that. I need
Yes.
someone to hold up a mirror, and I need to make it as I need to reward people for holding up
Mm-hmm.
that mirror, because people take a risk when they hold up that mirror. And if you don't reward them richly, they're never going to hold that mirror up again.
That's right.
and
That's right.
and so I'd love to get your thoughts, like, on sort of one of the ideas. And you have an
Yeah.
incredible career in HR, which I
Yeah.
do not. So I would love to get your thoughts. One of the things in the book, and we'll, I'm sure, talk about this more, that I recommend is for bias to create a bias disruptor. And you need
Yes.
to disrupt bias in the meeting, because if you just let it go and pull the person aside quietly later, the bias gets reinforced.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea of the bias disruptor is, first of all, shared vocabulary. I like to wave a purple flag. In fact, I have one here on my desk. But the key thing is, like, whatever words or phrases your team would feel, you could borrow language from Daniel Kahneman. You could
Yes.
use an I statement. I don't think you meant that the way it sounded. But you want to come up with a catchphrase so that it's a little bit easier for people to flag the bias, because it's awkward, and we've
Yes.
got to
Yeah.
build the muscle to do this. And then the second part of bias disruption is helping everyone learn to say thank you for pointing it out. Because
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about you, Ernest, but when someone points out that I've said or done something biased, I feel ashamed.
Yeah. Of course.
And I can tell you, like, where I feel it in my body. I feel a tingling in the back of my knees. It's the same
Mm-hmm.
sensation that I get if my kids walk too close to the edge of a precipice.
Yes.
And I rarely respond at my best when I'm when
Yes.
I'm in shame brain. I'm kind of in fight or flight mode.
Of course.
And so teaching people to say thank you for pointing it out, and either I get it, I'll work on not doing it again, or I don't get it, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, but I don't get it, can you tell me after the meeting? And, like,
Right.
that second thing is really hard for me, at least, to say, because, like, I'm ashamed because I've hurt someone, and I'm ashamed because I'm ignorant. I don't know what I did wrong.
Yeah.
And so teaching people that we're all have those. Have you ever had a moment like that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think it's critical. I think the other thing that goes along with this is teaching people about intent versus impact, right? And
Yeah.
really making sure that people understand, because part of the way you help alleviate that shame is if you create a culture where you say, we're going to assume good intent
Yeah.
behind what people are saying, even when they are saying biased things,
Yeah.
right? Because again, if
Yeah.
we go back to how we were defining bias here, we're unaware of
Yeah.
what we're doing, and we assume good intent. That creates an opportunity for us to wave our purple flag or
Yeah.
throw our fuzzy elephant across the
Yeah.
room, and
Yeah. Yeah.
and then that person can say, oh wow, okay, let me stop, let me pause, let me acknowledge that I might have said something that was offensive here.
Yeah.
And then Brene Brown is going through my brain, because she talks about shame being tied to that situation, not to the person, and
Yeah.
how we carry shame. And
Yeah.
shame should be in that moment, but not to that person, and
Yeah.
not to really
Yeah.
personalize it. I think is so
Yeah.
important. But I think
Yeah.
the other thing, Kim, I would point out around bias interrupters, which I think is so fantastic, is depending on what culture you're in around the world, where you may not be able to speak up. There's certain cultures where speaking up against a person who's in higher position of
Yeah.
power than you or a position of authority. When you create the culture to say we're going to have a bias interrupter, it could be something as simple as I'm going to raise my Zoom hand, or
Yeah.
I'm going to put up a Zoom picture or something like that.
Yeah.
It now creates opportunities for cultures all around the world to be able to tap into this and link into it and
Yeah.
not steal power away from another person.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's really important to be able to speak truth to power, but it's also it's difficult.
It is.
And the other thing is that if you are a person who has some authority in the room, you may not think of yourself as intimidating or hard
Yes.
to speak, but you are. And it's
Yeah.
maybe not you, but your position, the
Yes.
power all of a sudden is introducing sort of a dangerous fog to the situation because people are now not telling you stuff. And
Yeah.
so if you do have some power or authority, you're better off knowing than not knowing, right?
Look, Kim, I get it all the time. I'm a big black guy who's pretty gregarious, and I think of myself as very inviting to people. But I will have people who are close to me in work settings will say to me, "You realize that you're very intimidating right now to be able to talk to," because when I go into kind of big personality Ernest,
Yeah.
it fills up a room, and so I think having that space for bias interrupters is such an important thing.
Yeah. It's so interesting because I am a small white woman.
Yeah.
For those of you listening, you can't see me. I'm like barely 5 feet tall. And at one point in my career, I had an HR person come and tell me that I was intimidating to my team. And there's no reason, by the way, like let's dive in on the biases
Yes.
here. Like
Yes. Yes.
because this is a problematic story for me to tell because if I say little old me, like all of a sudden I'm playing into to all kinds of stereotypes that I really
Mm-hmm.
do not want to play into.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to be careful about how I'm telling this story. I've gotten some feedback on this story.
Mm-hmm.
But my point is that I did not perceive myself as intimidating.
Intimidating.
I perceive myself as a person who had struggled to be taken seriously all her career.
Yep.
And so when the HR person told me this, I was very skeptical. And the HR person said, go into the room and tell your team to do something that you know is impossible and see
Hmm.
if they push back. Notice whether they push back or not. And so I took her suggestion and indeed they did not push back. And I was like,
Yeah.
wow,
Uh-huh.
there's a problem here. And I need to address the problem. I need to
Yeah.
I need to reward again. It's about rewarding
Yes.
the candor,
The
rewarding
mirror.
people for holding up that mirror. I want to go back to something else you said, though, also, because I think it's really important and useful to
Mm-hmm.
assume good intent of others.
Yeah.
I think it makes it easier to go through the world. However, I also think it's really that can be weaponized. People can say
100%.
something incredibly offensive
A
and then
hundred
say
percent.
assume good intent, and that's
Yes.
so. How do you think about that? How do you manage through that?
Well, look, I would say, you look at this from multiple levels. I think as a leader of people or a leader of teams, you can really only if you do things multiple times, you offend
Yeah,
people multiple times, you're going to lose people. They're not going to assume good intent because you're not
yeah,
doing the work to
yeah,
really try to change that. And if you're a person who's been hurt or been
yeah,
marginalized, right? Assuming good intent, particularly of a person who you've seen who
yeah,
is prejudice or is
yeah,
bullying, right?
yeah,
It's really really hard to do. So I think assuming good intent works really really well in new situations when you walk into a new boss, you have a new team member, you have a new friend, assuming good intent, but people begin to show you who they are. And
yeah,
in those moments, right, we have to believe them, as Maya Angelou said. So
yeah.
I really,
Oh, that is I think about that all the time and I fail on that dimension. I just can't believe that someone actually, believes that or is being so mean.
yes, yeah.
You got to believe it.
You got to
Yeah.
believe it. You got to believe it.
Yeah.
So I think that assuming good intent works well in the beginning of situations, but if a person has presented over and over again, you can't do that anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's a good idea to assume good intent until you get other
Exactly. Exactly.
information. And I
Exactly.
think if you say something and someone is upset by it, I think it's not legit to demand that the other person assume good intent. Like it's your at that point when you've gotten some feedback, you want to reward the feedback by listening to what the person said and taking it on board, and
Yeah.
not getting super defensive and insisting that others assume good intent of others, but don't insist that they assume good
Assume
intent of
good
you.
intent. Absolutely, absolutely. It's funny when you talk about the mirror, holding the mirror up. I would always tell people when I teach diversity classes, I say, if you don't believe you have any biases, go home, pour a glass of wine for your significant other or whoever matters most to you in your life, and sit down with them over a glass of wine and say, when this subject comes up, how do I come across? And I say, and just sit back and put the bottle right beside you, because you're going to need to pour into your own glass several times as you really, So I guess in that moment, Kim, wine is the motivator, and the reward.
Well, or you need a little bit of maybe, anesthesia.
Yes, 100%.
That's what it is. Yeah. It can be really helpful. Absolutely.
It can be very helpful. But I think bias interrupters are just a really, really powerful thing.
So let's talk for a second about prejudice, because holding up a mirror is not going to work in the case of prejudice, because the person's going to like what they see. They're going to double down, and that is infuriating, actually, when the person doubles down. And I think to the extent that I have defaulted to silence too often, it's sometimes because I want to believe it's bias, but I'm afraid if I point it out, I'm going to learn it's not bias. The person really believes that BS.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that?
Well, I would say I'm probably a little bit opposite from you, Kev, where I believe it very quickly that a person is prejudiced, because unfortunately I've seen a good amount of it. I've experienced it. But, I think all too often working in HR, we sometimes don't pull the code of conduct quick enough.
Yeah.
We don't pull these tools that are embedded into the organizational structure and governance to really protect employees quick enough, for lots of reasons, right? It could be because this is a great employee or a great performer. This is a long tenured employee. But you know what? They're prejudiced, and they continue to show us that they're prejudiced. And so we need to abide by those governance rules that we have set forward in the company.
Yeah.
And I think
the law,
code of conduct,
at the very least.
100%. Yeah. So, look, I think codes of conduct are incredibly important. I've been working with a lot of startups and making sure those code of conducts are implemented very quickly. And everybody knows from the moment that they join the organization that they're there, because those guardrails are really important, and people have to understand there's consequences, which I know bleeds a bit into bullying, but there sometimes is a fine line between prejudice and bullying.
Yes, there absolutely is. I'll tell you a story about prejudice, and maybe this helps, because this was a moment where I wanted to believe that it was bias, and then I said something, and then I found out, lo and behold, it was not. It was prejudice. So I was sitting in a meeting, sort of chit-chatting with a guy before the meeting started, sitting in a conference room, and this guy said to me, and I had recently had kids. I'd recently had twins. And this guy said to me, and recently come back from maternity leave. So I was in a certain mindset. And this guy said to me, my wife doesn't work because it's better for the children, which was like a stab to the heart. But I assumed good intent. I assumed he didn't mean it. And so I tried to make a little joke, and I said, I decided to show up at work today because I wanted to neglect my children, and I was expecting him to sort of apologize and we would move on. No, that's not what happened. He doubled down and he said, Kim, it's really not a good idea for you to be coming to work. Like, it's really, I've got all these studies, so now this is, I held up the mirror and he grinned it, he doubled down. And so I think my response here's what I should have said. Let's not talk about what I actually said, which was kind of, not as much as I should have said. But I think this is where that code of conduct really helps. Because what I should have said, what I could have said was, it is an HR violation for you to tell me that I'm neglecting my children by showing up at work today. And an it statement like that and a code of conduct kind of makes it clear where the line is. One person, he can believe whatever he wants.
Yes,
And I didn't really
that's
want
right.
to engage with him on his beliefs, but he can't impose those beliefs on me.
Yes.
Either verbally or, there was also a possibility that he would not assign certain clients to me if I had to
Hmm.
travel, since he thought he knew what I should and shouldn't do
Yeah. Yeah.
vis-a-vis raising, so I was very grateful to work at a company where there was an where it was a violation.
Yes.
I think in other cases you can appeal to the law,
Hmm.
and or you can appeal to common sense. It is ridiculous for you to tell me how to raise my children, if I didn't have either the law or the HR policy on my side.
Yeah, like I think that's right. And I also think a lot of times what I see is people are there's fear, there's intimidation why people won't bring those it statements forward, right?
Yeah,
Because it's obvious this person has a belief that is now
yeah,
different from your own,
yeah,
which, many times that belief is exerted in a way and through power. And
yeah,
so therefore, that would have been very bold to say it is against company policy,
yeah,
for you to say to me, but that is the right thing, because I tell people
yeah,
all the time, when you walk away and now that person got to say that,
yeah,
and then now it's off their plate, but
yeah.
you're left to deal with it.
And it's
Yes,
running around in my head all day
exactly.
long.
Exactly. And so the immediate response to that, though, is to immediately create a situation for that person where
Yeah,
now it's running through
their head all day long.
their
Yeah,
head all day long, right? And I think that's the most important thing about it is how do you turn the tables in that?
yeah, yeah. So that
Yeah,
I could let it go and go about my day. And
exactly.
and also, I mean, if I wanted to give him a little bit of credit or help, it's helpful to him. Like, he's going to get in
Yeah,
bigger trouble at some point,
yeah,
if
yeah,
I don't point it out. So it's actually in service of both of us for him to know, assuming that he didn't want to violate the policy,
yeah.
which, again, maybe I'm assuming good intent, which maybe is a privilege of that I'm able to assume good intent so often.
That's true.
I haven't
That's true.
probably experienced as much
No,
prejudice.
that's true. I mean, I think the other piece with this, Kim, I think, I always, love when a person acknowledges privilege, whether it be a man, whether it be a white person, whomever. When acknowledging privilege, I think that is part of our humanity growing forward and moving forward. But I would also say the emotional tax, right, that comes
Yeah,
along with having been on the negative end of prejudice.
yeah,
Um, I think that the shorter we can shorten that emotional tax period is critical,
yes,
and that is how we move forward as humanity. Because right now, I think there's so many folks who continue to deal with that emotional tax, walk
yeah,
away, it runs in their brains instead of using an
yeah,
id statement, and instead of calling forward those codes of conduct and those rules and those laws that are built to help protect us when we
yeah,
can. When we
yeah.
can. Yeah.
Built to protect us and also built to help us get shit done fast and fair. I mean, like it's not good for an organization's productivity to have a bunch of people like paying this unfair mental tax, and it is
Yeah.
an unfair mental tax.
Agreed.
Like, it's not good for my productivity. And if he's going to keep doing that to the other women he works with, he's going to do more
Or
damage than
harm.
good on the team,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
so
Yes.
I think it's really important. Well, I think we're about time. Maybe next time we can do a bit of a
Talk
deeper
about
dive
bullying.
on bullying. We didn't get to
Yeah.
bullying, and that's an important topic. I think a lot of people have experienced that, unfortunately, and experience it like on a daily basis. So
Exactly. Exactly. Well, thanks for having me, Kim. This was great. I'm looking forward to more conversations as we dig into just work.
thank you so much. Really, I always love talking with you, Ernest, and I'm sure other people are going to enjoy joining in our conversations.
Can't wait.
All right. Take care, everybody. Bye.